Mustafa, thank you for being here.
Absolute pleasure.
I'm super excited.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, and welcome to New York. Mustafa is a new resident of New York City.
I am.
Yeah?
I am. Yeah.
Nice welcome. I think like a couple weeks
a lot
ago
of
we
excitement,
had
I can see.
flash flooding for you.
Yes.
Great welcome from Dubai. It's a little different.
Definitely is.
But thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to be moderating this chat and learning more about how PepsiCo thinks about responsible business and your new role. But for everyone here in the room, my name is Kendra Manzo. I work at the trade desk. I'm on the client development team. I oversee our global partnerships with a few amazing brands, including PepsiCo. So for anyone who's not familiar with the trade desk, we're really the largest global demand-side platform, independent within the space. So we work with marketers like PepsiCo to do data-driven advertising across the open internet. But you didn't come here to hear from me. We want to hear from Mustafa Shamseldin. So if you don't mind just giving us a quick introduction about you and your role within PepsiCo.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again for having me and for welcoming me to New York. My name is Mustafa Shamseldin. I'm Egyptian, and I've been with PepsiCo now 16 years. I just moved to New York, and in my new role, I'm heading what we call our global foods category. So I'm the category growth officer and chief marketing officer for our global foods business.
Okay, but what's your team really called behind closed doors?
Did we say that we're going to reveal that?
Yeah, you have to. I asked permission first.
So we ran a really nice competition when I joined the team, just to get, because we are a cross-functional team, right? And this is one of the things, and we can talk about that more. It's not just marketing, right? It's across all the different functions, because you need to think end to end and through the line to be able to deliver what we're trying to deliver. So we ran a competition, team naming competition, and we're now officially called Global Foodies.
Can we clap? Global Foodies. Yeah. Instead of international foods. It's so great. We love it. Okay, we got an applause.
And we have our own song, which we don't have the copyrights to reveal, but we actually wrote a song. I mean, it's a group of creatives. So we actually sat in a studio in Nashville with copywriters. We wrote a song, and I discovered, to my very pleasant surprise, that we had a drummer, we had a guitarist, we had someone that does bass, and we had a full band in the team, and we actually performed our own song, which we can't release yet for copyrights. We're still getting the copyrights, but we even have a song to prove it.
Amazing. We're working on legal approvals now. Amazing. I love it so much. So today we're really going to talk about your approach to responsibility while driving profitability within PepsiCo. So responsible business is a huge term. Can you just give us a little bit of background of what that means to you and what it means to PepsiCo as an organization?
So let me start with what it means for PepsiCo. There's something, 2 years ago, we launched this idea of PepsiCo Positive, and we call that winning with purpose. And at the core of it is the belief that you cannot deliver sustainable growth and return to shareholders without balancing growth, profitable growth, with doing the right thing for people and planet. And we call people and planet as the key ingredients of what that means. And it's actually something we review. We have a team working on it, obviously, but also we review in all our plans. So it's a core part of our growth strategies, what we call PepsiCo Positive, and how do we address the people and planet side of it.
Amazing. And for you, what does it mean to you?
So for me, just given where I'm from, given also that I've worked in different parts of the company, honestly, it means that we have a responsibility and an opportunity to really have an impact on the world of food. I mean, we are one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world. And just to give you a number on what that means in terms of context, we are in 200 countries, and we touch 1 billion consumers a day. I mean, every time I say that number, it overwhelms me. I mean, it's just a crazy number, just a number difficult to comprehend. 1 billion consumers a day. So we have both a responsibility and an opportunity to change the world of food, from how food is farmed, to how it's produced, to how it's sold, to how people consume it and what people consume. So I genuinely believe we have that opportunity everywhere in the world. And that's what I try to bring with my background and my experience.
Amazing. One slightly big task.
Yeah,
so within this space, what's a unique challenge that you, PepsiCo, has faced in driving this mission forward, and what are the key learnings that you've applied?
I'd say there are two really big ones.
Okay.
The one that you started with, and this idea of balancing profitable growth with purpose, is a tricky one, because you need to balance what the consumer wants and what is profitable today with what is right and what is profitable tomorrow. And I mean, the reality is, if you look at all the different elements, and we can talk about regenerative farming, we can talk about even what we call positive choices and what we're doing on reformulating the product, even packaging, there is always a say-do gap, always. So consumers will always say something and not translate that into action. So that that creates a pressure on P&Ls, on how you generate return on investment by actions that we do. So we've made the decision that we'll always stay one step ahead. We'll always, and we can talk about that a little bit more. So that is one big challenge. So that's I'd say, an end-to-end profit and loss P&L challenge, right? Which is why we created this growth team, right? It's not a marketing team, it's a category growth team to bridge that end-to-end challenge. The second one is, how do you do that in an authentic way that is true to the brands? And when you do that, it's not easy, it's a creative challenge. So the first one is a business challenge, the second one is a creative challenge. When you do that really well, it's incredible. When you don't get that right, it does create challenges for the brand and, I mean, with different stakeholders.
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, 1 billion people. That's what we're looking at. We're trying to keep 1 billion people happy and fed.
Every day.
Every day. Incredible. So to that end, I'd love to get a little bit more specific to any of your purpose-driven initiatives and ones that have been particularly successful, and how you're using the learnings from that to apply to future solving of challenges moving forward.
So I can talk about a few. I mean, let's start with our biggest brand, with Lay's, which I hope everybody here is familiar with and loves as much as I do. So Lay's is the single biggest snack brand in the world. It's also the single largest buyer of potatoes in the world. Right? We buy more potatoes than any company in the world. So we've decided that Lay's should play a role in the future of farming. So we've made significant investments in regenerative farming, and how do we help farming communities across the world get better returns on the land, but also better longevity for what the land produces, including sometimes working with farmers on changing crops, on farming potatoes, but then changing it every few years to something else so that the land generates better output. But also we're working with our farmers across the world, and we have hundreds of thousands of farmers. We buy potatoes from farmers in every country in the world almost. We're working with them on better farming practices that conserve water and that produce less CO2 for the environment. I mean, these are all significant technological challenges, but we've made a commitment to invest in regenerative farming. Difficult to talk about, which was the second creative part that the creative challenge that I spoke about.
But I was about to ask, how are you getting that out to our?
It's difficult. It's difficult, and it's one of the creative challenges that I'm working with the team on, and I'll comment on that in a second. But so that's an example of how we're taking a brand, the role it plays in society, the role it plays in the value chain, and making investments that are better for the planet. On the other. Another example is a brand like Quaker, which I also hope all of you have had breakfast with this morning. But Quaker is quite a unique brand because it starts with a very positive supply chain from the start. I mean, we invested so much in oat farming and across the world, and now, so that's one piece of it. So that's the planet piece. But what the brand does really well is it also translates what the brand stands for, which is positive nutrition, and the ability to really start the day with, and the impact it has on heart health, but also on mental health, and translates that into what the brand stands for. And that's a great example of how you take a brand all the way from supply chain all the way to the consumer communication.
Amazing. And I've learned this about you, that it's really about combining the forces of operations and marketing, bringing them closer together, which makes a tremendous amount of sense. And it becomes easier for people who are working in that creative, they understand that side of the business, to then message that to the masses, to billions.
Yeah. I'd like to say that, I mean, I'm talking to a group of brand and marketing creatives. and innovators. I'd like to think that the marketers of tomorrow have to think in that way. I'd like to think that as the world evolves and as brands evolve beyond just the brand, which is also what consumers expect, successful marketers of tomorrow, there are two things that they need to think about really well. First, how they use data and personalization. I know that's something we want to talk about. That's one. But also how the brand has impact across the value chain. And I think the old world where marketers were only concerned with the communication part is not going to be the future. You really need to think through the line.
Yep. And I'm seeing this, it's the collapsing of silos across the organization. Yep. Within PepsiCo, where there's so much more cross communication that used to be restricted to closed door sessions are now collaborative sessions.
Yeah,
and you pick names for yourselves and write songs.
Yeah, and in my team now, it's not just marketing. So we have marketing, we have R&D, commercialization, insights. It's all part of the same team. And Global Foodie's name is for all of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And they happen to be great musicians. It's important.
Yeah, not me though, but yeah.
I don't believe that. So you were actually touching on this, but how do you think about data when we're talking about getting this message out to the community and personalization? But how do you infuse data within this space?
So let me talk about consumer data, because we use a lot of data and technology on the regenerative and farming side. And actually there's huge investment. I mean, it's fascinating. When I was in Brazil, for example, recently, I saw how we use drones and how we use data from drones to inform farmers on how to improve their farming practices. It was fascinating. And that's something I think we're going to continue to invest in. On the consumer side, we've made progress, but I'll start by saying that PepsiCo, and I'd like to make that claim for many of my peers in the consumer industry, have not yet, the fast-moving consumer goods industry, have not yet been able to leverage data and personalization in its full power and full scale. I mean, there's a reason for it. I mean, if you think about 1 billion consumers a day, that is a large number, and it's a data challenge and it's a technology challenge. And each transaction is small in its own right. It's different than companies that have fewer transactions but bigger transactions. So that's one of the reasons. And also the go-to-market and just the geographical scale, that's another reason. But I envision a future, and that's what the team are working on, where we are able to use data to do two things. To understand how to better serve consumers and better provide them with nutrition, with better products for them, enable us to innovate on what you need to what negatives you take out of the product, what you add to it. I mean, use data to inform decisions on how much diverse ingredients or how much whole grain do we need to inject in diets in different countries. Or same for beverages. I talk about foods, but the same for beverages. What you need to add to the product to actually impact a specific community or society or even an individual with what you want to add to the product. And then how do you tailor the communication to help them make better choices? So that's how I envision the future. Now, it is, again, a challenge getting from where we are today to that point, but that's where we want to head.
I love the ambition. And I mean, it's doable considering all of the signals that we have access to today. It's really a question of distilling it in a way that you can serve consumers the correct creative based on what their interests are that will get them to pay attention. Because it can't just be a universal education campaign because not everyone wants to be educated. So I really admire it, and I have a lot of faith in PepsiCo's ability to deliver on that. So in terms of the balancing act of driving profitability and being responsible, the position you've been with the organization for 16 plus years, you've been a business owner within the organization managing P&Ls. What is the advice that you have for marketers, maybe less involved in the managing of a P&L and understanding the full value chain? How can they take your experience and apply that to their strategies moving forward?
So I'd say a couple of things. One thing I touched on, which is my belief, and I try to do that for my team also, my belief that the marketer of tomorrow needs to understand as much of the different elements of the business as possible, call it end-to-end thinking. And actually, we call that as one of the skills as we hire people, as we train people. We call it end-to-end thinking. I mean, I did a sales role, I did an e-commerce role, I did the general management role, I was in franchise, and all of these bring something to our discussions when we talk to markets and when I talk with my team. And it's one of the things I try to inject in terms of our talent. So, as an example, as when I landed in the role, one of the things I looked at is how we make sure we have diversity of experiences, of geographies, of course, given that we're an international business, but also of experiences. So we brought in team members from different franchise businesses that worked on Amazon or that worked on different, or had completely, I'd say, non-marketing, non-pure marketing experience. And they've added a lot to the conversation. So this idea of end-to-end thinking, I think, is absolutely critical. It helps me a lot. And then the second thing is I'd say, and not just for a marketer, I'd say as a leader, always connect what you believe with what you're doing day to day. And an ex-boss of mine said something I will never forget. She said, you should never disconnect your lives from your livelihoods. And she explained what that meant. She said that the way you think about your family, the way you think about yourself at home, the way you think about the community or where you're from, needs to connect with how you think about the impact you're making in the company you're working for or the brands you're working for. And I believe that is almost a responsibility for anyone, but marketers especially, because you have the voice of the brands, right? You have you're the interface between humans all over the world and the company and how the company talks to people. So that would be my second one.
Amazing. I was like, what do I say specifically in response? But really, it doesn't, without words, because ultimately it's about leading through example, is what you're getting to, and then also that diversity of thought, diversity of experience, being open to alternative perspectives through collaboration, and just understanding that you're part of something as opposed to the thing, right? So I really appreciate that perspective. So giving us a little glimpse into the future, I feel like we've gotten a lot of glimpses into the future. You haven't really held back in what your goals are, but what's next for you in the immediate next steps in terms of continuing purpose-driven marketing and end-to-end approach?
So honestly, we're just starting. I mean, there's a lot of work that is in flight and we still need to do on just on the product side. So we're aggressively looking at what we're calling reduction of negative. So we made commitments on taking out sodium, taking out saturated fat, significant reductions. We're also looking at how to, and the point I just made on what we're calling addition of positive. So we actually did a study and worked with some scientific agencies and identified what are the big nutrition gaps across the world, and how do we, given the billion transactions we have every day, contribute to that. And we are now looking at, and I think soon we're going to actually make a big announcement on it, how much diverse ingredients and whole grain we want to add to the diet across the world. And we believe we can actually make an impact. I mean, if you think about a small change times a billion, that's a huge number. So we want to contribute to heart health and health across the world by making a commitment on how much we want to add to our products. So there's a lot of work happening there. We also want to play our role in beyond just the product. I mean, I believe I have a role, and it's a discussion that we're having on how we select products that have better impact on the planet in terms of less emissions, right? It's a very difficult conversation to have, because when we think about emissions, we think about all the value chain. I mean, the choice of flavor has an impact on emissions, because each flavor has, I mean, the way you farm the flavor has an impact on emissions. It's a very difficult conversation. It's a conversation you can only have if you bring all the different functions. But we're actually having these conversations. I'm sitting with my team and thinking through which flavor do we want to launch because this is better for the planet. And it is complicated, and it's going to take us time to get there. Packaging is another one, and I'll put that out there. It's something that it's a difficult one to solve, especially for snacks. I think beverages, we've made a lot of progress, and I know we need to do more. But that's another, and we're conscious about all of them, and we are having live discussions across all of them. So that's on the planet side. On the brand side, we're calling positive brands, this creative challenge of how you tell the story. I mean, I gave the example of Lay's. We're investing millions of dollars across the world because we believe it's the right thing. But we'd like to take consumers along the journey. And it's a difficult creative challenge. And we were just with the team yesterday to talk about that. How do we nudge consumers in a way that enables the investments in PepsiCo positive to drive growth, because that is the only way it will be sustainable. If we disconnect purpose from growth, there will always be a point where you're under pressure to, I don't know, reduce the investment or do something different. We need to connect the investments we're making on purpose, on PepsiCo positive, to growth, and that's the only way it's going to be sustainable, and the only way, which is where I started, that it delivers long-term shareholder impact. So these are
a true balancing act. Yes. And getting everyone to see years in the future as opposed to the next quarter, while also considering the next quarter. But how important is that? Because you're planning for the long term with PepsiCo.
Yep.
Thank you so much for this. This has been incredible to learn from you. I believe we might have, we have 10 minutes left. Wow, we flew. I love this for us. We can open it up to questions if anyone has questions for Mustafa. No, oh, I love it.
You were mentioning different flavoring on products, or similar products, I guess, to countries. So, potato chips might taste different in Thailand than here. How do you go about doing market research to find out how to do that?
I mean, we source and we rely on local potatoes everywhere in the world. So that's a starting point. So and in fact, Lay's is quite unique as a brand. If you talk to consumers in Thailand, they tell you it's a local brand. If you talk to consumers in the US, or Sabrita's consumers in Mexico, they tell you it's a local brand. And that's quite unique about Lay's, because Lay's, and it's been there for decades, but also because of the way Lay's thinks about flavor and the way it plays a role in meals and meal occasions and cultures. So we think about flavor in a way that starts with the local food culture. So we don't think about global flavors and taking them everywhere in the world. We always start with what is relevant and what the consumers are looking for. And the researches that we do, the research methodology, always starts with what we think consumers would appreciate as a flavor in that local country. So first of all, it starts with local potatoes. So that's a very important starting point. But then we always think about designing flavors that are relevant to the local food culture, not that come from global to local.
Do you mind giving us examples of some flavors that we might think is a little bizarre, but is beloved by a certain market?
So the one that I keep mentioning is shrimp flavor on Lay's, which a lot of people get.
I like shrimp chips.
Yeah.
So it's like
no, but shrimp flavored,
shrimp flavored,
which is actually #1 in quite a few markets, and a lot of other markets find very different, is what I would say. I mean, we have one of the big flavors in Thailand, just to pick that, I think was salted egg. It's actually one of the big flavors, which is a very big dish in Thailand, but would not work in a lot of parts of the world. Right? It's personalization. I mean, it is personalization. I mean, collecting data has its own challenges, and I think we have a process that works, and we're learning as we go. But personalization at our scale, personalization at scale. At the scale of a company like PepsiCo is really the challenge. Personalization of insights, personalization of communication. It's a big challenge. It's kind of the picture I was trying to paint, where we have a future where we can understand almost at individual level what are the favorite flavors, what do people like, and what are the occasions, but also what are nutrition needs. And we are able to tailor the communication almost, I mean, it will never be one-to-one. I hope it will be, I don't think it will ever be. But we tailor it at a small enough group so that we are able to talk to consumers that feel that it's at an individual level. Yeah.
There's a microphone we have now.
I just want to go back to the Lay's comment, and maybe there's other products as well. Have you done a pop-up or thought about doing a pop-up in a city like New York so that you can have all these international flavors and create these marketing moments with influencers, celebrities coming around and trying all these things?
So let me throw the question back. So let me put the question back. How many of you would actually walk into a pop-up like that? Let me do quick market research.
That would be super fun.
Okay.
I want to see all the flavors.
All right.
I don't care about the celebrities. I want the
So-
flavors.
Okay. So first of all, we had actually a very interesting Lay's. It wasn't the booth. It was I can't remember the name in the Dubai Expo. So in Expo 2020, we had a big Lay's room, and it actually showed. You couldn't taste all the flavors because it's logistically impossible, but it had a really nice way of showing all the flavors from across the world, and you could actually press a button and it would give you different scents because flavors have their scents, right? We can check the Japanese scents, etc. So, and Lay's is quite unique and flavor is so core to the brand, which is why we talk about it a lot on Lay's, especially on Lay's. So we did have something in the Dubai Expo, and it created a lot of buzz, and there was a lot of interest in it. But I think we have the opportunity, the reason I did that quick research, to take it to a different level. So I think Lay's can play a role beyond just potato chip, because it is bigger than a potato chip. I mean, it's the single biggest snack in the world, and it offers a very simple and enjoyable moment that goes beyond just the product. So the answer is we think that's a great idea, but we need to make sure that it's a viable business model, which is not easy. And then it adds to the brand and it contributes to the core brand rather than becomes a side gig, if you want. So I would love to see that happen, and now I can count on some people to attend if you ever open.
You can follow up with me. The glasses.
Hey, thanks for speaking with us. Curious, what other brand purpose initiatives is PepsiCo really getting behind? I heard sustainability, but are there things like STEM or investments into kids, or what other kind of purpose-driven marketing are you guys doing at PepsiCo?
So PepsiCo has done a lot of work across all of those, but I want to maybe break it down in two levels, right? So there's also the PepsiCo Foundation, which PepsiCo funds, and they've done a lot of work. Actually, it's a lot of work that I might not even be able to give justice to. They really they invest in disaster relief, and they really helped in a lot of areas across the world, and it's funded by PepsiCo. So that is fully funded, and they do a lot of that in education. Education being an example, STEM being another example. At PepsiCo, actually, there is the brand piece, which is what I focused on, but PepsiCo also does a lot of work across multiple areas. So one of them is diversity and inclusion, right? So, I mean, I'll give an example. We've made a commitment on the percentage of female leaders we want to have in the company, and it's something I track in my team. Proud to say that we have a significant percentage of my team. Actually, it's bigger, more than 50%, but it's something we need to do even more of. We look at different ethnic groups and their representation. So there's a big, and it's public. I mean, it's in we publish this data and we track it, and we talk about it regularly in our planning discussions. We also, and that's in the US and in many parts of the world, but many parts of the world have their own diversity criteria and measures. So that's one example. There are other investments we make, and call them investments we make in sustainability initiatives, where we identify a problem that is relevant to the brand and invest in it and not always talk about it. And the example I'd give is Quaker Crescent. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. It's a program that started in Latin America. And it started with the Quaker team realizing that while Quaker is about nutrition and a healthy start for the day, there are hundreds of thousands of children that cannot go through or have their education impaired simply because if you don't have, you don't have a good start for the day, you don't have the right nutrition, your cognitive abilities get impacted. And the reality is these kids would never be able to afford a full Quaker meal. They can't afford much. So what the team did is they created this program. They worked with an NGO to create a very specific product that studied what is missing in the nutrition in their diets. And they created the product only for that group of kids. And they, through the NGO, they're now distributing it to, and I think it's 250,000. I mean, don't quote the number, I might get the number wrong, but they already are impacting hundreds of thousands of kids in that country. And now we're taking that program and we're rolling it in many markets in the world, including North America. And we're doing Europe, we're doing a few markets. And it started with This is what the brand stands for. This is a real issue that we want to address, and we want to create, and we actually invested R&D resources to create that product. And I don't think these kids will ever afford to buy Quaker, but that's not the point. We believe we have an impact, and we have a responsibility to impact nutrition in these countries. So that's an example. Yeah.
That's such a great note to end on. Just thinking about purpose-driven marketing and how that translates into action. So thank you so much for sharing that.
With pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, guys.